Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right, welcome to episode, I think it's actually 410, but maybe it's 409. I don't know. I'll double check. If yesterday's was 409, watch or didn't notice that like that's also the name of like a really popular cleaner. So this is the cleaning episode. It's going to be the cleanest live stream on the planet. Jim said I was watching pre-recorded Josh. Now I'm watching live Josh. I'm all Joshed up. I'm glad to keep you company, Jim. How's it going, buddy? How's the next episode of Unicornians coming along? So today, what I'm going to do is, I don't know why, but I have like a really raspy throat today. It's not like I'm sick or anything, but for some reason, just real like kind of dry throat. But I plan on working on Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. At some point in the next few days, I have to take some author photos, which is a little weird for Turner Publishing, and get them a new bio, which is kind of cool. Again, that means they're getting all the information to kind of start putting together press releases and, you know, designing this thing and stuff. So it's getting closer, but we have to color page 151, and then kind of move on and move forward on the book. So that's what I plan on doing today, at least for this stream, is I'm going to color page 151. So let's go to our daily stream, and we're just going to start coloring it and hanging out. Hopefully you guys are working on creative projects or just kind of enjoy watching the process. This book's really interesting in the sense that previous comic coloring projects, usually the first step is going to be to flat when you're coloring, which is what I'm doing now, is kind of flat coloring. And then your next step after that would actually be to like render and add shading and stuff. This style that I'm doing for this specific book is kind of in reverse of that, so it's pretty interesting, to say the least, because it's kind of like working backwards. But one thing I really like about comics is I like the ability to kind of change up your style and make it match whatever the narrative is. I don't know. There's something really cool about indie comics in that way, where you're not necessarily like, I think for a book to be consistent, whatever style you pick, you kind of want to be a little consistent with it. But I do like switching up art styles quite a bit, and so that's pretty fun, and I'm excited about potentially getting to Two Stories Book 2 after this, which will be the sequel for my previous one. On this page, so we have Elizabeth waking up from a bad dream. Her her brother, and basically we finally have the dog back in the picture. Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog. But right now, what I'm doing is basically like flat coloring. So I'm picking. You know what? I'm gonna go panel by panel. I was gonna do flats for everything, and that just feels like it'll take longer than just going panel by panel. So this is a previous scene where we had the birth of their child. There he is, all snuggled up there with their dog. But I can pull from this, so that's kind of goal here, is to pull colors from this previous page, and because it's in the same room and about the same time of day. So let's see here. We're doing Elizabeth though. So does this have Elizabeth's eyes? Doesn't. Her eyes weren't visible. So I might have to go on to a page that would have her eyes, which would probably be the previous page. Let's see here. Just trying to find a. I'm scrolling through previous pages to catch the eye color of this. So yeah, my friend, my good friend, who's the drummer of, so he was jammed around. We didn't really record anything. I think my other friend Josh might have recorded some of our jams just to see if there was any meat there, anything worth building out to like a song or something. But it was a lot of fun to kind of see, my good friend and, play music and stuff like that. And I might be doing that again tonight because he's still up. So I went ahead and left my my SG over there. So I've been really enjoying that guitar. I didn't get a lot of playing out of it. Like it's like a Gibson SG. I recorded a couple songs with it, but I'm still kind of breaking in that guitar because my go-to is usually a Stratocaster or Telecaster. But yeah, I was really feeling that yesterday, so I think I'm gonna continue playing that tonight. But yeah, it was a good night. A lot of interesting conversations, memories, kind of fun stuff. I think one of the nice things about getting to my age is you get to know certain people that you feel completely comfortable around. Like I think that's a good sign of a good friend is somebody you just feel like you can totally be yourself. You don't have to like put on pretenses around. And I think that as you get older, that kind of friendship is really valuable. Like people who just kind of know you super well, um, to where you can just kind of be all facets of yourself, as silly as that is. So, yeah, we're coloring the page, and my goal is to hopefully get through the entire page. And then after this, what I have to do on my comic is the next set of roughs. And I'm going to do as many roughs as I can handle for the next few days. So I'll probably be live streaming while doing those too. Which is always an interesting process because that's more kind of the step one of the process, but it's always a little weird live streaming during it because there's so much thought involved in the process. And I feel like thinky parts of the process are harder to live stream while you're doing it. We have this is funny in one of our fish tanks. Like they're really cool. They're like underwater snails. One of them is called a mystery snail, which makes them like they're kind of like blue. But anyhow, so the funny thing is, this morning I go to the fish tank. I put the food and algae wafers and all the little stuff we give the fish in the fish tanks. And the one with the snails, I look in there and they're completely getting it on. Like, I felt like I should turn off the fish tank lights and put on Al Green or something for them. they were getting busy. It was kind of funny. Wasn't quite expecting that. I was like, man, get a tank, you guys, get a tank. Crazy, wild. So anyhow, so my day's fine. Just, a little weird in the house after seeing, the snails mate. That was a little strange. It was a little heavy for the morning, okay? Just a little much. So let's see how this is going. Yeah, this book is gonna be good. I'm excited about it. It gets fun as it picks up too. Originally, I wrote during this part, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. Like if Robert's up late at night, kind of watching over his wife who's kind of feeling sick, and stuff, it's like it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to be wearing at least his suit jacket. So I kind of had him without his suit jacket. And then I gave Elizabeth a new nightgown as well. She has a different nightgown earlier, and I thought nice to kind of switch it up and give her another nightgown as well. Just because, frankly, I just don't want to get bored. I think, oh, that's actually something I don't know if I've mentioned. I think one of the things that makes comics good, um, at least so far, like again, this is my third graphic novel that I'm working on, so I don't know if I'm an expert at this point. There's a lot of artists who've done a lot more pages of comics than me. But at least as far as I've figured out this far along with at least indie comics, like my little slice of whatever readership I have. Um, I think entertaining layouts and stuff is a good thing. Trying to kind of change things up, change costumes, change backgrounds, like just keep yourself interested. I think is a really powerful thing in art. I don't know what you guys think, but that to me has been like almost like a superpower. We got Adam and Jim in the chats. Jim said the book is looking really great. Thank you. And then Adam said, "Hey, you guys." The way you said "Hey, you guys" sounds very much like "Hey, you guys." It sounds a little a little sloth like, the way you type that. I don't know if it was meant to sound like that, Adam, but it did. It sounded like sloth when I read it. Um, how are you guys doing out there? Adam, you mentioned you and Jim are working on something. What are you guys working? You is it a? Oh, nice. Adamson said Goonies style was intentional. I like it. You know what? I read this really recently. There's a movie. This is gonna be no shock to anyone. It's not like this is not a loved movie, but one of my favorite movies is The Princess Bride. Like it's a really great movie. Um, and in The Princess Bride, there's the character of I think Vincini. I think that's his name. And I read this voiced Vincini, and how he had practiced for like, he got the script and he practiced for like a day and a half just saying the word inconceivable, to where he could like have it have a ring to it. I guess what's making me think of this is the "Hey you guys" thing, right? Because it's kind of a catchphrase, um, and I guess that some actors will really practice like their phrasing so that they can kind of make something iconic. And this actor really thought he needed to like really say inconceivable, like in that exact kind of tone. Um, and then he kind of second guessed his actor's choice, and it was really interesting just hearing that he was like feeling kind of vulnerable about it and stuff like that. And then he did it on the set, and all of the actors for like the next week were saying inconceivable, and he's like, okay, cool. It's like a musical tone to it, to where it became like kind of an iconic moment of the movie. Just one line that the character says. Um, I don't know. It was interesting. It was just an interesting thing. Jim said Adam's been showing my spills from my cartoons look like animated in Midjourney. Pretty awesome. I don't know what spills are. So Adam's gonna use like Midjourney to kind of make Jim Luhan cartoons. Okay, interesting. Oh, stills. Okay, nice. That's kind of fascinating. That to me is kind of like potentially for an indie creator, that might be like one of the uses of AI I would kind of approve of, is like the idea of taking your own stills and then having it sort of animate those. So it's kind of like almost like using them as like in betweeners or something like that. All right, here we go. That'll be an interesting project. I'd love to see it. All right, guys. We have Elizabeth. Now we need. You know what's crazy to me is like the era of animation where what I'm doing right now is almost like similar to like cell shading. Like it's like you know, on old Disney films or old Looney Tunes where they would have that like transparent. I'm trying to think of what it's called. It's like a plastic that they would like draw each frame of the character. And on the front, they'd have like the line art, and then on the back, they would paint like flat colors using cell vinyl. And what I'm doing is kind of that process, just digital. But just thinking back, like it's like I remember when I was in high school. No, not high school, middle. I went to a buddy's house. Jim said, "I agree, Josh. Nice. Yeah, I do too. I think there's potential for things in AI to not be, you know, totally destructive. Like I feel like there's I'm not a fan of most uses of it, but I think there are uses that we haven't thought of headaches and still enable, creator voices and creator innovation without like destroying the creator. I just think unfortunately we're in like a weird world where all those exploits like, AI for war and AI for and stuff is inevitable. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that in a realist way. Like, just our path in history is so forged with really interesting innovations that are used for good and then instantly exploited to like the worst possible use you can think of. That hurts humans too. So it's a human journey, you know, where I think some of the negatives have definitely become pretty obvious, you know. Um, I read something recently, and I hope this is going to actually be put into play, but I read that Spotify is potentially going to like sweep the house and get rid of AI music, which I think is a really good, like, you know, people who just kind of type in a prompt for a song or something like that. I think Spotify is going to start sweeping and getting rid of it because I think they're getting overloaded with just, you know, crap that somebody just typed, you know, like, so I think that can be dangerous for people who are out there like actually making the thing. But I also think like, you know, within that, like, let's say, you know, you use AI as like another instrument or something like that. Uh, Adam said it's cutting down on mass generated repetitive AI stuff next week. That's good too. Um, because I think the platforms kind of need. Realize it's I think the biggest fear, not just creators, but like, you know, content publishers are gonna have is like, you know, you're just gonna get in a world where all you're doing is just buying stuff made by robots, like, and it just kind of misses that hand done touch. Yeah, that's the thing that Adam was saying. He's like, yeah, it's interesting in Mid Journey, it'll just like kind of fill the in betweens. Yeah, that's what I think is really cool. Or doing things like voice syncing and stuff like that for like an independent creator. You know, it could function in a way kind of like Photoshop did for everyone else, like where it's you know, when Photoshop first came out, it's like everybody freaked out. And there was this I think we might be in kind of a similar, these are just thoughts off the cuff, nothing I've like really thought about too heavily, but we might be in kind of a similar situation to the advent of like Photoshop when an Illustrator, when graphic design. You guys, like, I'm old enough to remember this. A lot of people probably aren't. Where there was this era of graphic design, like the very early '90s, where, well, not just the early '90s. Sorry, it was more like the mid to late '90s. But also the early actually no, it's probably like the mid '90s where this was at its worst. But it's like everybody like went crazy and thought their cousin was a graphic designer because of the ability to, you know, have like a font and not have to use like a typographer, and not have to do paste up and stuff like that. And there's this like brief period in graphic design where everything just kind of looked like vomit, like 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 rainbow vomit is how I describe it. And I think early Image comics were kind of like that, where they were like so excited about this new digital coloring process that a lot of these guys, like colorists, you know, when comics went to be colored digitally, just got like just ridiculous. Like everything had a shine on it, you know, that kind of thing. And then after a couple of years, you know, you of that like kind of dominating the field, everybody being like, this is the future. The new tool was still implemented, so everybody did switch to doing it digitally, but they went back to a lot of the fundamentals of like limiting color palettes and um, really like kind of thinking through it a little more and realizing like they had kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater, like where there were certain things that were good that were being done, um, that had gotten sacrificed because of the tool. And so it's like I think I think that hopefully AI will do a similar thing where it'll self correct. Unfortunately, corporations are going to use it for the worst. You know, if you're just like thinking fiduciary responsibility and keeping the bottom line low and the profits high, obviously having one human that you have to hire versus, you know, uh, or a whole team of humans versus like one person with a keyboard that can just punch in stupid ideas. Um, they're going to opt for the one person with the keyboard. But I do think that the market will. I am optimistic and hopeful that the market will correct for that because there was a death of typography for a long time. People may not remember this, but then like there was a rebirth of typography with people like Jessica Hish and Chris Ware is actually one of the kind of people to kind of re-kick this up. Like the idea of like really doing beautiful lettering and going back to like the fundamentals of like sign painting and stuff like that uh to create, but sometimes incorporate modern tools like Photoshop and stuff to do these things, but without having to like cell shade like I was describing. That's pretty much what I'm doing. It's just a heck of a lot quicker. The only thing that kind of sucks about let me see here. I need to see if there's another page in this room that I might be better to pull from. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Casa Guide. When was the last time they were in Casa Guide? Was it page 100? And I'm just thinking out loud about it, but it's like I think there are definitely like ethical uses that are unexplored, and I think it'll make some. I think there might be some really interesting developments with it, but I think kind of much like the atom or anything else, like we should be careful what we're making, and not just like throw out the fundamentals, because that'll be temporary in my mind. Like I could be wrong, but I think throwing out the fundamentals, could be real disastrous. Jim said the advent of Photoshop comparison is a great point. The human touch remains. Yeah. And I mean, there was an era where a lot of people thought like, well, drawing's done, typography and kerning and all that stuff, that's all done. And then they actually were wrong. Like a really good typographer still has value. Now, are there as many jobs in that field? No, right? I like my family was impacted by that automation pretty heavily. Like my dad was a graphic designer when I was a baby, and he switched careers because he didn't want to go back to college. He had like 10 degrees, well, not 10 degrees, but like four college degrees. And he just didn't want to like relearn how to use the computer to do this thing he had learned how to do without a computer. So he was like a graphic designer in the paste up days. And yeah, I mean the whole industry was like decimated, so I don't want to like downplay it in the sense of like some of the negatives for sure, that will probably end up and are probably happening as we speak. But I do think there's going to be hopefully like a rebirth of some of those traditional, because again, my dad was also, wasn't sticking around in that industry for everything to kind of correct itself. So it's like, I think that's the key, is you kind of have to stick in there till things correct themselves. And also, I think make art because you want to make art. Like, I guess in a weird way, us indie kids have a huge advantage in this new era because it's not like most of us are making this stuff for profit anyway. It's like, dude, I'm making graphic novels. I'm spending years on these things. and I might make a tiny little profit, but I doubt it. you know, I'm going into it kind of knowing I'm probably not going to make a profit, but I'm going to make a beautiful book. Um, and hopefully a lot of people read it, right? But it's like my main goal is like I want to make a beautiful book that I made, right? That I can feel proud of. Like I don't want to just like prompt it. I don't know, just something about that wouldn't feel right. So so I don't know, but it's an interesting time. Jim said, "I'm right there with you, J boy." That's right, J boys for life. Um, all right, what do we got here? Got a room coming in here. So anyhow, what I was gonna say with cell shading though is like I am amazed by like just how old school animators used to get stuff done because it's like that is crazy to like manually paint and store all that stuff. Because I remember I had a friend again, like late junior high, early high school. I go over to his house, and his mom used to do cell shading, like that was her job. And so she'd be up, like with her cell vinyl out, and I acetate like the clear sheets, and she had like the little animator's pegboard, and she would like flip it. And the thing is, uh, it was like a very like manual labor kind of job, like not really like an art major kind of job on the line of animation. So like she would get these mailed to her because this is like pre-internet. They would like mail her like a color, like it's interesting. It was like a sheet that would have like a color map, like a color chart of the scene, and then she would basically like do like pretty much like paint by number paintings of each in between frame using cell vinyl, like just painting it. But it was like a technique that was really hard to do and did require training because it's like they would paint, she was able to like paint within the lines like these perfectly crisp flat colors. Now, I don't know how much talent in general that takes because I've never really messed with cell vinyl, but I've always been curious to mess with cell vinyl. I was in grad. There was a painter who still is doing art to this day. He does gallery work and stuff, but his name was Robert Picorni, and he was a gig poster artist, and then he went to Cal State Long Beach to get his MFA and explore fine art, and now he is doing like fine art, like gallery work and stuff. But when he started doing gallery work, he was doing these like big, massive, like you know, uh, wood panel, wood panel paintings. But he'd use cell vinyl, and I guess he like special ordered it and stuff. And the one regret I have from grad school is I should have taken advantage of that and been like, "Hey, can I mess around with your cell vinyl just for a second?" I mean, he may not have been cool with that too because he had to special order it, so he probably wouldn't have wanted me to like blast through any of his paint. But it would have been fun to mess with it and just see how well it flowed. And it was hard to tell with him. Like I want to say he said that it was because he was like a gouache artist prior to that. He used a lot of gouache. And he said that it laid flatter than gouache. So it was easier to get like a consistent flat color with cell vinyl. But I don't know. Like, because the thing is, he was also like an incredibly talented painter and could pretty much like make any medium look like it just took no effort at all, like to make like perfectly crisp, beautiful brush strokes and stuff. So it's it's hard to know whether that's true or not. But that is one. I think most mediums in art I've messed with and I know how to use, but cell vinyl is probably the only thing that I have never painted with. But anyhow, so I just think of like like anytime I'm flatting and I'm feeling like, I don't want to flat colors. I'm like, I have to remember that there was an era where, someone's job was to like hand paint every single like frame of an animated thing, even like cheap animations done for, TV and stuff. If it was in color, it had to be. I like that is mind-boggling. The amount of work and how quick they were, because she would knock those out. Like this lady that I knew, um, she would just knock those out. Like she'd, get like a bunch done. Like, but the funny thing is, like, it did take time, and that's the like. Well, I guess it's not funny, but it's just like I think a lot of people. I wonder if I bet this happens in other industries too, where you have people who maybe like look up like a hack online for something and instantly like hold on a sec. I'm sure there's people who look up like hacks for things online, like, plumbing and stuff like that. And I think they might be mystified by like everything's doable, but it's just like takes a lot of time. Um, a good example of this is where I used to work as an art director. We did a lot of like keychains that were like enamel color filled keychains and lapel pins and stuff. So those like really nice enamel ones that you would get at like as a souvenir at a store where it's got like raised metal and the metal looks really cool and the lines are metal and then the color is done with enamel. And I remember when I started there thinking, oh well, this must be just like because they sent all of this was manufactured like most of these. There was like a human being in China at a factory, where like they're stamping the metal. Um, they have like a little stamp that has like the impressions of the line, so that makes it pop out, and then they're manually going in there with like enamel colors and going squirt, 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 like filling each little gap in the keychain. And then basically somebody else is bringing it and like buffing it against like a belt sander so that it's like shiny and even. And then it's like baked. And it's like all like a craft you could do as a kid, but just on like an industrial scale. And I remember being like weirded out because I'm like, wow, we're in this like era of automation and stuff like that. And there's a human being doing every single part of this process. Um, Anyhow, I made a comic about it a long time ago, like a one pager that was called Everything is Handmade, about this kind of realization. But it always mystifies me how many things are actually handmade in this day and age that a lot of people probably think are, like a computer does it. Another example is like I think that a lot of processes in like building electronics and assembling components and stuff, it's hand done. Like if you're ever bored and you want to see something really cool for just like mechanized processes and stuff, like look up how guitars are made in factories. It's nuts. It's like a lot of the process is still human beings, like doing the binding on the guitars and like actually like inlaying the dots, and like a lot of it's still hand done, like in a wood shop. It's like it's on like a more globalized scale, and there's like routing machines and stuff that help with the carve of the guitar at the bigger factories. But it's like still a lot of it, a lot more than I think we think, is still human beings, like making these things. Um, I think sometimes we get divorced from that. Uh, Being consumers, you get divorced from the makers of things. It's kind of like, I guess, if you eat fast food long enough, you might actually forget because it's so quick and just kind of mechanized and consistent. You know, I think people might have this idea that like, yeah, and even as automation kind of rages on and stuff, it is fascinating how much of that process, even though it's been become more streamlined and less humanized, there's still like a human being like cooking your, you know, jumbo jack or whatever at Jack in the Box. That's wild to me. I don't know. It's interesting. I gotta know about this. Dylan said I just watched new episodes of the anime on Netflix called Dan da Dan. It's good so far. I think they're releasing episodes weekly. I need to watch some anime again. It's been a long time. Um, it's been a long time since I've watched like an animated series. I think the last one I got really into, just because my son was into it, is this one. It's so silly. If you guys haven't checked this out, you should. On Netflix, there's a kids program. I think it's like originally in Korea or something. But and it's like computer, it's like CG animation. But it's called Bread Barber Shop, and I absolutely love it. And it's exactly what the name is. It's like a piece of bread barber shop with like other foods as characters. It's a great show. I have a suspicion it might have been inspired by that. If you guys remember, Blur had a video a long time ago for Coffee and TV, the song Coffee and TV, that had like a running animated carton of milk. It was amazing. It was a great video back in the day. But anyhow, I think they might have been inspired by that for the kids show because they do have a milk carton that looks suspiciously similar to the Blur milk carton. And its name is Wilk. All right, Elizabeth said, "Hi, Joshua Kemble and chat." Hello, Elizabeth. How you doing? I'm doing a story about an Elizabeth, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. That's what I'm working on right now. Dylan said, "I heard a saying that if you were fed slop from the beginning, you'd think that you were eating gourmet food." Yeah, it's a it is interesting the way that perception kind of hits us with things. Like, yeah, you do kind of wonder. I think that kind of is what's happening. Well, I guess that would be kind of hyperbolic to say, but I I do feel like a bit of that is happening with entertainment where people are used to really quick hits. Um and so it's gotten people conditioned to like not have the patience for, you know, really considered work. Um so I do think that kind of happens where people when people are inculcated, you know, I think that's kind of what's going on with the in politics now too, where if you just lie enough times, if like all you do is lie, it's like people just get this diet of lies. That's just the way the world is. They're like, well, I mean, who can tell what's true anymore, right? It's like you just feed people enough lies, and eventually they're just like, okay, like I'll buy them. Um, I don't know. I do feel like there's a lot of that going on with food and with art. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day because I think I was talking about this on stream where I've been having like superhero fatigue, where I just I'm kind of like I was a little kid in Superman pajamas just like every other kid in my demographic. Like especially if you were a kid in the 80s, early 80s, you know, those Christopher Reeves like Superman movies were really impactful. Like uh growing our superhero identities, you know? And so by all means I should be one of the target market of that, you know, new Superman. Because it looks like it's going to be a little, I don't know, you know, it looks like they're going maybe the right way with it, like where it's going to be a brighter, happier Superman, which is where Superman. But I'm done with, like, I'm so feeling over superheroes. Um, it's just too much, you know, it's like the market is flooded. And I feel similar to kind of how I did when I got out of superhero comics and got more into indie comics, was just like, man, just people want like the same superhero story with like a different pair of spandex. You know, it's like the same story, but it's like you change. This is like Superman, but his spandex are green. You know, it's like that kind of thing. And after a while, it's like, doesn't somebody want something other than just like capes and tights, capes and tights, capes and tights? You know, fighting movie, fighting movie, fighting movie. And again, like I like these things, but I think it was when I was watching like The Bear, which I was just incredibly impressed by, and I was like, how is like that not like like it's just so refreshing to have a different kind of story amid this slew of like superhero stuff. But it does remind me of I remember reading an interview. Let's do redo. I remember reading an interview Daniel Klaus where he was talking about how he used to kind of hate comics because of just how much like people just wanted superhero. I don't think he said slop because I don't even know if that was like a term back then, but pretty much that like superhero slop. And he got really frustrated, you know, in the comic industry because it's like it just seems like that's all people want to read. And then he said he felt less frustrated when he started realizing, like when the superhero boom happened in film, because he realized, oh, it's not comic readers. It's like everybody just wants this like same story over and over and over and over again. Like, um, Elizabeth said, I was more William Catt from The Greatest American Hero. I don't actually know The Greatest American Hero or who William Catt is. Jim was saying, I feel like Christopher Reeve's Superman had an underlying sense of kindness to them, good natured. Yeah, me too. And so I am excited at the like again. I probably won't see that movie for like a year, but um, but I am excited like at the prospect of it showing like a kind of more like iconic, mythic sort of Superman like the one I, you know, knew as a kid. But it's interesting to me like the you'll see this like I and by the way guys, I'm just coloring this page, okay? That's all I'm doing. I'm just coloring pages. And thinking out loud. But but one thing that is frustrating as an indie creator, and I've seen it over and over again with people, it's like the convention there's like a convention psychology that's hard to kind of pin down. Like a good example of it. When I'll use myself, so I'm not like putting another creator on blast or something. So when I was first working on my first comic ever, I made this comic called Numb. It wasn't like my first comic ever, but it was like my first serious comic as an adult, like trying to make a real good comic. I remember show it to friends, and friends being like, yeah, let's just go out, because I was in my 20s, early 20s, and so it's like I had a lot of friends who'd be like, let's go out drinking and stuff like that, and I'd be like, well, I'm working on this thing, and like nobody was really all that interested in what I was doing. Like nobody I knew, even like close friends and stuff, were just kind of like, yeah, whatever, like really weird, because I was like so invested in it. And I do think that's the nature of just people, right? Like, you're going to have interests that I'm not super interested in. We all have like limited resources. We're all like, the main character in our own little movies. But I do remember then I got the Zarek grant just by chance. Like I don't know what they saw in it, but they decided to give me the Zarek grant, which some press for it. And then I remember all these people that had no interest in it for like the longest time are suddenly just like real supportive of it now that there's an audience. And it was just like a weird dichotomy. But that's what I mean by the convention aesthetic, because I think there is a thing that kind of happens when a line forms, where people at a convention will not stop at a booth without a line. Like if there's nobody stopping at a booth, you're kind of like, if you're behind the booth and no one is stopping, uh, behind the booth and nobody is stopping uh, to see your stuff, like no one's gonna stop. Like it's a weird thing where people will look at others. I think it's because we're social creatures, but we'll look at others for like what is acceptable to be interested in. Like, are other people into it? Well, if they're into it, then I've got to be into it. And by the way, I like talking about this as if I'm any different. I am the same way, where somebody will be like, oh, you should check out this band. And I'm like, I don't know, and then finally, a year later, enough people that I trust their opinion have told me, check out this band. And maybe I've read a couple articles or something about them that I finally am like, okay, fine, I'll check it out. That's because I had friends who were just like, dude, you would love this. You need to check it out. And it took me a long time and a lot of people I trust before I even invested my time in, this show. Like just to even watch it. So it's a weird thing about humans where I think that kind of is what happens with the superhero thing, where I think I think people, it's hard to verbalize. Again, none of this is like pre-thought out before I go live. But it's like I do think people have Chris said, I thought you were cool in your 20s. Well, I thought you were cool in your 20s too. That's my good friend who I've had since I was in my 20s. And actually, I will say, one of the reasons I think Chris and I are still friends is I think we were pretty supportive of each other's projects when we were in the thick of it, and like nobody could care less like we cared. And I think that helped us get through making creative work. Actually, honestly, like, yeah, because there's a lot of times when I was starting to freelance where Chris and I, literally would hang out with each other because we were both trying to do freelance and stuff. And so we were like able to have somebody who didn't think what we were doing was crazy, support us. And we were both it felt more like being in the trenches together. But anyhow, I guess what I'm getting at is like, I feel like people kind of do want like the same song over and over again. A band I enjoy, but I know people who can't completely hate them, and I understand why. Is AC/DC. AC/DC I really like, but I will not argue to anyone, that AC/DC's songs don't all kind of sound like the same exact song. Like, and I love AC/DC's awesome. I would go see them live. I mean, they're great. But do all their songs kind of sound like the exact same song, like over and over again? Yes. It all sounds like the same song. Like I don't think any serious AC/DC fan is going to be like, no, there's like all these nuances to their songs. No, most of their songs, it's like the same song, and it's a really good song. Um, it's like the same song. Elizabeth said, "Oh, I love AC/DC. I'm an Aussie. Nice, that's awesome." So I think there is something where people like that, like the predictability of um the same song over and over again because they like it. But I think that can be dangerous to. I think that kind of want for the same thing over and over again can be really dangerous for creators, not for consumers as much, but for creators being encouraged in those times when, like, I think about something like, what to me is like just a mystery and really encouraging to me as a creative. It's gonna sound silly. It's SpongeBob SquarePants is like to me such an encouraging thing. Uh, what a just crazy premise that show is. Somehow amid all this like people just wanting the same thing over and over again, a creator came out of the woodworks and was like, yeah, I'm going to make a story about a sponge that lives in a pineapple under the sea. And it became something. Now, when that guy was starting coming up with SpongeBob SquarePants before everybody was into it, that's the story I'm kind of interested in, is like how did creators deal with that time where nobody cares about your band, where nobody cares about your crazy pineapple under the sea story. Once it's a worldwide phenomenon, like that story is pretty obvious, right? But like, what lights the first fire that creates the line at the convention is what I'm getting at, that people are drawn to. Because like, there is that fear and that reality of like, it it's an interesting thing, but there is a possibility that your work just never gets discovered. Elizabeth said, "My kids threatened to jump out of the car back when because I played Pearl Jam's last repeat. I reluctantly chose their lives over the song." Hey, Pearl Jam's Last Kiss is a freaking. I believe that's a cover song, right? But yeah, that's a great cover. Um, I actually very much enjoy Pearl Jam. I think they're a great band. I do think it's funny that Eddie Vedder had such a unique way of singing, and it just became for years after it blew up. That was the line at the convention. Everybody was trying to kind of that was the capes and tights for quite a few years. There was the Eddie Vedder voice, where I think Eddie Vedder just sincerely sings like that, but after Eddie Vedder, you had like this slew of bands that were like trying to be Eddie Vedder. Like they were like, it's like it's wild that became like the cool T-shirt that everybody wants to wear. Was the Eddie Vedder voice? Like all the bands, there was this era of the '90s where if you had a new rock band, like 9 times out of 10, they would be trying to sing like Eddie Vedder. Um, Interesting. Do you guys remember that? Like every band would be like, gonna hurt neighbor too. And don't get me wrong, I love Pearl Jam and I love Eddie Vedder, but it's like that was a capes and tights moment where like there was a point in the '90s where I was like, okay, I love Eddie Vedder, but enough of this. Every singer is Eddie Vedder. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like I feel like that just naturally happens in art, where it's like you have like raw, folk music, and then before you know it, it's like it becomes the mamas and the papas. It's like this produced. Wait, it's not. Is it the mamas and the papas that had that like just really overproduced folk music, where they'd cover like the times they are changing and get into like a choral like overproduced like I don't know. Um, Dylan said, I saw an IG reel of a guy dancing. Pretty funny way to Limp Bizkit and thought of you. Nice. Well, I'm glad I'm in your thoughts. Um, yeah, it's just it anyhow, as like an indie creator, I don't want to sound like sour grapes, right? But it's like it's interesting because if one of my books blew up, I can see why like people when they're creators and they suddenly get huge um why they like might distrust compliments because like think about uh The Walking Dead, the comic The Walking Dead. Um can you imagine going from being just like an obscure indie comic artist to being like what The Walking Dead is now? And then it's like, you were at the convention, last year before it blew up, having people just walk by your booth, right? They'd look down at your table and be like, meh, and walk by. And then the next year, the same people are like coming by and they're like, man, I've always been a fan of you. And you're like, yeah, I can see why that builds distrust because, or like a sense of like alienation and stuff. It's interesting. I don't know if there's a way around that weird herd dynamic we have as people. We're like, we want to like the cool thing and we want to make the cool thing, but rarely do we want to take a chance on something that's not already stamped with the approval of other people. It's an interesting thing, and I don't know what the I don't know where that goes. I'm not trying to be like discouraging. I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just kind of, and it is a thing where and if you're like listening to this and you doubt that it's a thing, just pay attention to if you're on the street um, and there's like a street vendor selling hot dogs or something. Um, just notice how quick that line will build if like one or two people are like talking about how good those street vendor tacos are. But if like nobody goes, or not tacos, but hot dogs, whatever it is, right? Nobody will go to the like the first who is the first person to go to the hot dog to start that craze? It's interesting. And I guess there's like a whole psychology. I mean, there's probably like a whole major in college about it, like marketing, right? Is like how do you build that what they call viral now, like virality or whatever. But it's I think in the sense of comics or cartoonists or artists, it's a tough thing because I think we're used to being a little bit outside of the like yeah, I think artists naturally are a little bit outside of that system of like the guy who's buying like Stussy because Stussy sells well, or Hurley because Hurley's cool. Like, or, seeing their neighbor's jet ski and being like, well, now I got to buy a jet ski. And, or seeing like, you know what I mean? I think there's something in creatives that's a little bit different than that, maybe outside of that. And so I think it's a little weird to navigate. Like, luckily, it's less weird now, but when I was younger, and still, there's days now where it is hard to navigate a little bit because my interests aren't necessarily like whatever other people are interested in, or what the cool thing is. and yet there are parts. And I'm not saying I'm totally above it. I'm just saying, I think as a creator, you're kind of an outsider, in general, because otherwise, like, why would you be so nerdy? You're just like sitting and drawing alone for long periods of time. You know what I mean? Um, there's something different about creators, in art, and I think that the world can crush creators, pretty easily. That fight to try to kind of like, pour your blood and sweat into something that you potentially no one's going to care about, it is a real fight. you know um and yet we do it. I don't know, it's an interesting. I don't know where I'm going here, guys, with this talk, but I oh, they're talking about Jack Black. He released. I love Jack Black. Um, I've liked Jack Black. I was okay. I got introduced to Jack Black a long time ago in L.A. by seeing Tenacious D like open. They opened for some band, and it was just the funniest thing I'd ever heard. Like it was hilarious. Um, and then I think High Fidelity sold me on Jack Black as well, where just his character in High Fidelity. But I am a big nerd for especially that first Tenacious D album. Like I absolutely, I probably have listened to that album like a million times, and know it word for word. But Jack Black is a force of good. And what's funny is Jack Black in himself is kind of the same thing I was talking about, where it's just the same capes and tights over and over again. Like Jack Black is literally in everything now. Um, and in that case, I don't know, it doesn't bug me. I really enjoy Jack Black, so I feel like, yeah, put him in every movie. But I could understand if somebody was like, I'm a little like, again, I'm not over Jack Black. I still enjoy Jack Black, but I could understand somebody having like, at this point, maybe a little bit of like, okay, enough Jack Black, because he is like, my kid is really into a bunch of stuff, and he's literally in like my son's really upset, like really into Mario, and he's also really into Minecraft, right? And it's like, well, there it's Jack Black and Jack Black, and then he, likes Kung Fu Panda, and it's Jack Black. You know what I mean? He's like in everything. Um, Now in that case, for some reason, it hasn't gotten old to me, but I could see why people might have Jack Black fatigue for sure, because it is kind of doing the same thing as like the superhero stuff. You guys, we're getting closer. We have basically gotten through most of the page, which is exciting because I need to finish this page. Okay. Let me make I'm going to make a call here. I'm going to make this ring that same red as the carpet. Dylan said my introduction to Jack Black was School of Rock. School of Rock's a good movie. All right. Let's get into it. Let's do the dog here. We'll start with the dog. So how are you guys doing? What are you working on? Adam said, "Did you ever see the old Tenacious D show?" Yeah, the HBO was great. It adds context to a lot of their songs too. Um, because there's that song, and that song, if you haven't seen the Tenacious D show, doesn't make as much sense as when you've seen the show and they show this guy who's it's such a good premise. I'm gonna just talk about it just in case any of you guys haven't seen it. So in the show, Jack Black uh, and KG are um, it's really funny. They start getting stalked by this guy named Lee, who's like he's at every show and he like ends up finding where their house is. But the catch is they actually have like they don't have a lot of fans, and so they start stalking him. Like they actually start stalking their stalker, um, named Lee, and then singing the song Lee about him. Because they just like they're so excited to have a stalker. All right, we have to finish this page. I gotta call my mom too. She just called, hoping she's okay. But I gotta finish this page first. Okay, we got yeah. Adam said it's funny to contrast that with Jack Black's current projects. Yeah, and the thing is, like, that was interesting about Tenacious D is there was like a real like they gigged around LA all the time, like back in the day. Whose joke was that? Or there was a joke a long time ago by a comedian where he said like back in the day it was a Tuesday or something like that. All right, guys, we have. Thank you, Elizabeth, for tuning in. All the way from Australia. Australia's rad, but Vegemite is evil. It's like I think Vegemite might be the most evil thing I've ever experienced. I think back when Kevin Cross and I were doing a podcast called Big Illustration Party Time, we had an Australian, um, I think it was Chris McQuinlan back in the day or something. But anyhow, this might have been after. But anyhow, Chris McQuinlan sent like a care package to Kevin Cross, and one of the things in it was Vegemite. No, this was after BIPT because uh, that's back when Kevin was living here, so more recent. Anyhow, so Kevin got sent this Vegemite, and he convinced me to try it, and I, that taste did not leave my mouth for like weeks. It was awful. Adam said, "I remember that. It's the first time I had heard of Vegemite." Anyway, sorry, Elizabeth. It's not like you're responsible for the creation of Vegemite. All right, guys, we're getting closer. Um, there's a couple things. So let's do Elizabeth's eyes. If you guys are enjoying this, take 2 seconds to hit the like button. I always forget to mention that to people, and that helps. Costs you nothing. Means everything. Okay. We got the mouth here. Anyhow, on that same note, I kind of see why people do get drawn to the crowd, right? Because there is something kind of alienating about being really into like a good example. When I was in junior high, um, I read Lord of the Rings because I had nerdy hippie parents who were really into Lord of the Rings, like before the movies came out, right? And I remember reading this just amazing book and then knowing absolutely no one I knew had read the book. Like, it's kind of a weird alienating feeling. And that wasn't even like an obscure book or anything, but it's just like other than like my parents, like I didn't know any of my peers who were like super into Lord of the Rings. And I remember trying to convince friends at the time to like read Lord of the Rings. And having kind of a similar thing when I read Catcher in the Rye, where I just didn't know anybody that was reading it. So I had to like convince people, like, you have to read this book. It's so good. Um, just so I'd have like some peers or friends to talk to about it. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, I can see why those weren't even obscure examples, but this is like pre-internet. So there weren't like chat rooms or, Reddit, forums or anything to like geek out about the thing you like love. So I can see why the kind of obscure stuff is harder to get into because if it is good, your chances of like meeting somebody or even finding a space online that's like nerding out about the thing are really, really slim. And so there is something fun about being a part of like a community that is like super into, Warhammer or Star Wars or whatever the thing is. Like there is like a tribal thing that's positive from it where it's like when you meet other people, like I've been enjoying baseball recently, and that's a weird thing for me because I've always felt very alienated from sports. But ever since getting really into like the Dodgers, right? And watching, like games and listening to games and stuff, um, paying attention to the season. There is something really fun when you bump into somebody else who's like a Dodger fan or a baseball fan, right? Because it's like it instantly gives you dialogue to have. There's like a bonding communal thing. Uh, you meet another person who's like super into, pavement or something, and it's like there's a nice feeling, like a common bond there. And you kind of don't get that super indie stuff, right? Unless you make it. Like, you have to kind of, you know, spread the word about this. Like, no, you guys have to check this out, right? But there is something nice about not having to find other folks to get them, not having to like preach the word of something to get it out there, right? Like, it's already out there in the ether. Okay. So we have Elizabeth here. And now we got to just do Robert. Dylan said, I've been feeling a little lonely lately in our house since it's only myself and our dog. Now I like to be around people. Well, we're not meant to, like, no one's an island. I mean, it's an old saying, but it's like we're social creatures. We're not meant to be um hermits. We're just not meant for that, right? Um so we are supposed to be kind of in community with other people. I have like a split thing with that because I have the I'm like split between really enjoying, you know, my time alone, kind of working. Doing things like this though are really helpful for that because I will say prior to like live streaming, the act of making comics is just like incredibly lonely. Um, and so being able to kind of do it in a virtual studio and hang out with you guys is like a big game changer for that. Because it's an isolated career or pursuit. And so it is fun to have ways to kind of cheat code it so you don't feel too isolated. But then there's also times where like I want to feel isolated. Like I want to feel that like I don't want to use the cheat code. I want to just feel isolated or just be like a consumer and like listen to music and get in the zone while I'm, in my little imaginary create space, right? But it's nice to have the option, whereas like uh the only way around that was to like my buddy Chris who's in the chats, like we would cheat code it by just hanging out and working together on different solo projects, because we'd be like up, till like the wee hours of the morning, like working on these weird, projects. But just something about hanging out with somebody else where you can kind of shoot what while working is like a game changer. Like that is a big thing. Dylan was saying is, I wonder if this is what my dad felt during the pandemic. He went almost sturdy crazy. I'm learning that community is needed. I know we're all social creatures, but I'm an introvert. Me too. Me too. Uh, and the thing is also, I think that having socialization gives more meaning to things. Like, I think you can kind of very easily lose the plot if you stay alone too. Someone is literally ringing my door, so I'll be right back. Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna put on a trailer.
Our heroic adventurers fought orcs, monsters, sorcerers, necromancers, Now they find themselves in front of a mystical library. What shall they find? It's all in the roll of the dice.
We've come this far. There's great power behind this door. I can feel it. We just have to get past it. This door is no match for my axe. I shall chop it down. You always want to use brute strength. Why don't you try knocking? We'll try it your way. You may enter. The library is open to all those who seek knowledge. Feel free to look through our tomes. Maybe you'll find the answers you seek. I sense great power here, and it's behind those shelves. Indeed, there are powerful items hidden behind these shelves, but you can only get there through the enchanted words. Do you have those words? I believe I do.
Tremble before the Cremble.
There is great power. Look at that glove. Must be so powerful. That is not where I sense this power. I must get closer. I found them. I found the sacred manuscripts written by Joshua Kemble. Behold, I now possess 2 stories and Jacob's apartment. Please tell us more about 2 stories and Jacob's apartment, and who is Joshua Kemble? Xeric Award-winning cartoonist Joshua Kemble is a freelance artist, graphic designer, and author. 2 Stories is a confessional graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. Jacob's Apartment is a coming-of-age graphic novel in the vein of Ghost Road and Fun Home. It weaves together the threads of spiritual faith, identity, purpose, love, and loss to create an engrossing world in which waking and sleeping dreams collide. You have made your choice. The passage is now closed. Wait, can I get that glove? No. Oh. All right, let's go.
All right, so we're finishing up the panel. Almost done, which is pretty exciting. I cannot wait to wrap this up. Literally have about maybe a minute left. Dylan said, tomorrow my aunt, her daughter, and granddaughter are going on that steamboat. That sounds amazing. Yeah, I think you... I kind of learned this the hard way. Like, I think most people are familiar with this on my stream, but like a couple years back, I had like a complete breakdown kind of thing. And I don't want to get too into it, but it's like, I'm pretty prone to like, depression and other such things. And one of the things I learned during that experience was like the importance to not like work myself to death in isolation kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense. So I do try to prioritize, socializing and stuff much more than I used to. However, at times like this where I have like a publisher's deadline, and I have to hit the crunch time, it's like this month is going to be pretty isolated. But even during this month, during that time, that's part of why like my friend's in town, so I visited him. I'm trying to kind of make sure that I prioritize those things as well. Adam said, when is your deadline? I believe I need to have the majority of this book done by the end of the month. We're already at the point where I need like author photos and stuff like that to be sent. So it's becoming real quick. Like we already finalized the cover and the and now like all the kind of info for, you know, press releases and stuff. Because I think they're aiming for a release in May. So that's my hope, is like to not have to like push it. And they're going to work with me in the sense that, you know, some of the galleys they can start putting together while I'm creating the rest of the book. But ideally, I need to have this done as soon as possible. Like it needs to get done. So I've been in crunch time because it's like the end of summer, and I'll be able to carve out pages here and there during the school year. But this is like my time to like really hit the ground running and get as much done as I can in the next, you know, month. Not a bad thing though, very exciting. Like, you know, a lot of that really fun stuff. Okay. Adam said, are you working on 2 Stories volume 2 after this one? Yes, that's what I will finish right when this one's done. So this one, 2 Stories volume 2. And then in my head, I'll take a break from comics, but in reality, maybe not. But yeah, volume 2 for 2 Stories is set. I'm really far along in that. Like I have a script finished. I've literally thumbnailed the entire and roughed out the entire book. So it's just plug and play with like getting the pages done. And so I really cannot wait to kind of get that completed. But, you know, in comics, I feel like everything takes a little bit longer than I would anticipate. Like, and that's just been my consistent experience with making comics, is everything takes quite a bit longer than you think it's going to take. Okay. So we're going to do our thing here. We're almost done, guys. Adam said, I read the whole layout version. Nice. Yeah, I feel really strongly about it as a book, too. Stories, the 2 volumes, will probably be my best written stuff. Like I'm proud of Jacob's Apartment. I think it's a good book. I'm proud of 2 Stories volume 1, but I think volume 1 and 2 together are going to be just really strong work. And so those have to happen. And then we'll see how many graphic novels I have in me after, you know. It's a big undertaking. I have to say that when you're working on your own, it's there is something really fun about that. Like, this process has been cool, like collaborating with a writer. But there's something real personal and magical about, you know, kind of creating your own thing, like from the ground up, that I'm eager to get back to after this. You guys were so close. So close. Okay. Dylan said a collected edition called 4 Stories. Well, the 2 stories thing has multiple meanings. Like, so there's a bunch of things to it. Like, so 2 Stories was always intended to be kind of 2 books, 2 parts, and 2 different variations. So it varies from, in style between 2 different styles. So there's a lot of meaning behind the 2 stories. And it's telling 2 stories, kind of one of adulthood and one of childhood. And so that is there's a lot of 2, as corny as that is. There is like a kind of deeper thing going with it. All right, guys. All I have to do is block in his face. Yeah, it's been a long time on this book, like a lot longer than I was anticipating. Some of that was kind of outside of my control. Like originally we had a different publisher and they actually got bought by Turner Publishing. And so there was like a good half a year, I think, where everything was kind of in the air with the project. Thank God they decided to go forward with publishing it. And then I've had to ask for a few extensions to get the work done. So it's hit a couple hiccups, but now things are kind of in play to get it done. And then there was like a whole change of career I had to do. That's part of why I needed an extension. But yeah, it's been a journey kind of making this thing. A marathon, and we're getting closer to the end. Which is pretty fun. It's like at this point I'm kind of seeing the finish line. That like if you ever are working on a big project, there is a momentum that happens toward the end where you can start to see, like, it's like you've been running. I feel like I've been working on this thing, and I'm finally at that point where like the end is nigh. Like I can see it, and I'm excited about it. So we're getting closer. There's still quite a gallop to go, but we're getting closer, and that's really encouraging. So I am definitely pumped about it. I will be doing a stream, so we're almost done with the stream today, but just so you know, I'll be doing a stream probably, either today or tomorrow, where I'll be starting to rough out pages as quickly as I can, as many as I can, for the next sections of the book, because this catches me up with my roughs. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. If you thought anything we talked about was really interesting, comment in the comments section. That makes a big deal for the algorithm, as does just taking the brief time to hit that like button. I appreciate you guys. I really appreciate the support in the community. And I finished this page. So we have a finished page. Thanks, guys. I will see you on the next live stream. Yeah, thanks for all your support, especially those of you who've been hanging out with me for years. It's like a little family, so I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys on the next live stream. Thanks to everybody in the chats, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. You too, Adam. Thanks. All right. Bye, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream.